Men of Reddit, when was the last time you've cried and why? I had to put my cat down yesterday. That sucked. My marriage was on the verge of collapse when my ex-wife got a job offer in another state. She had been unemployed for some time, so she had to take the job. We decided I should stay behind since I had a steady job and divorce was inevitable. My wife moved out and the kids stayed with me until she got a home in her new city. Taking my kids to the airport and putting them on a plane to move away from me was soul crushing. I held it together until they boarded. Once they got on the plane, I lost my crap. My kids only lasted a few months with mom before packing up and moving back to live with me. I'm sorry about your marriage. Been there. I'm glad you have your kids. Sunday, wife has sudden onset of insomnia and anxiety since Christmas, which has started to trigger panic attacks. She had one while I was at work and called me. When I was free to call back, my son answered the phone. I was sobbing listening to my 6-year-old talk her through the breathing exercises we had practiced. That kid gets ice cream for life. No questions asked, and I might go cry again. My ex-fiance left me after I spent 9 days in the hospital battling dual pneumonia and almost dying. I was tucking in my 7-year-old daughter a couple of months ago, and she told me that she was worried about me dying before her. I'm only 42 and healthy, so I had a conversation about how old I am likely to live and that she will be an adult when I die. Then she said, "But when you do die, will you help me? Because I need you so much," and I lost it. I was 5 or 6 when I had my first existential crisis. I was taking a shower and realized everyone I loved would die at some point. I'm just grateful I've been able to spend as much time as I have with my parents and grandparents and stuff. Months ago, when my best friend was found dead in his car after a week-long search for him, turned out he killed himself. I lost a friend last year. I really do understand it's a pain like no other. Every time I consider suicide, I cry thinking about him and remember the pain it caused for all of my friends. I've teared up a few times, but last time I legitimately cried was in 2010 when we put my childhood dog down. I was a senior in high school. We had him since I was in first grade, 1998. He was my first and only childhood dog, a Siberian Husky, and I feel like we grew up in that house together. He had some cancerous tumor in his stomach that was spreading rather quick, and the attempt at removing didn't go so well as they couldn't get it all. We decided as a family to let him go peacefully so he didn't have to suffer, as they promised us it would continue to grow and possibly cause him severe pain in the near future. I'll never forget holding him in my arms in that room as the vet asked me if I was ready for the moment. When she injected him, I felt his entire body sink into my arms. He was lifeless in an instant. I was so happy he went peacefully without pain. My best friend growing up. I've never expressed my emotions from that moment to anyone besides my parents and my current girlfriend. Whenever I think back to that moment, I get teary-eyed, but I'm happy I was there for him in his final moments. I wouldn't change a thing if I could go back in time. Please try and be there for your pet if you ever have to make such a decision. Woke up at 4 AM after dreaming my dad told me he has days to live, then realized he is actually dead. I have those dreams about my nan and my granddad. They suck so bad. The realization when you wake is just such a gut punch. A few weeks ago, when one of my best friends told me he's going to be a dad, I can go for months and months without shedding a single tear, but these news got me really emotional, in the best sense of the word. This has been an eye-opening experience for me, as I had no idea I was capable of feeling such things. I had some dream in which I don't really remember what happened, but when I woke up I was sobbing like a child. I stopped almost immediately once I was awake. Very strange. Month ago, was yelling at my kids because they were misbehaving and I put them to bed early. Broke down afterwards and cried on the stairs. Knew I didn't have to yell as much and said some unnecessary things. Wife talked with me on the stairs and it turned into a turning point in my life, and I'm doing much better with the discipline. It's never too late to apologize and explain to your children why you were yelling. While I held my 4-year-old daughter in my arms and realized there was nothing that I could do to save her from dying from mitochondrial disease, I don't think I had ever cried so hard before or since. 7 years later it still haunts me, but time does make it less painful. That helplessness, the anger cry combined with the grief cry combined with the hopeless cry and the loss of the future you wanted cry. I know that cry too. It's a deep well in the heart. I'm so sorry about your daughter. When my GF broke up with me through a phone call after 6 years, just couldn't hold it together. Same bro, I feel you. Stay strong. Took a small getaway trip, about 8 hours drive few weeks back due to stress. I played all of the songs I shouldn't play on the drive up and let myself unwind in the car and get all of that stuff out. Job stress, feelings toward my ex, the whole gamut. Did me well. So cathartic. July 2019. I surprised my long distance girlfriend for her birthday after not seeing her for 3 months. Her reaction was bland, which shook me a bit, but I was like, maybe she's tired from college and work. I've gotten us a nice Airbnb for 2 nights so we can have some privacy, but nothing felt right. Last night we were just listening to some music. She was sitting on the bed pressed against the wall, eyes closed. I was laying on my stomach and then Georgia by Vance Joy started playing. I teared up and covered my face with my arm. That moment I realized our relationship peaked sometime before. It was only downhill ahead. I cried without any sound and she felt the bed shaking from me sobbing. Asked me what's wrong and then I opened up about how I feel that I'm 100% into this relationship but not getting the same back. She started crying as well. Confirmed everything I said and promised she'll try to improve and bring back the spark we once had. We broke up 3 months later. Oh man, do I miss that girl. God dang dude, I feel you there. The feeling of it peaking and never being the same. Knowing it's over. Such a hard feeling to express as a guy, but one that can really rip you apart. I don't know you, but I'm rooting for you, man. And anyone else in this situation. My daughter was born the start of last year. Think I must have cried for a solid hour. Last week at our first ultrasound, wife and I have had 2 miscarriages and we had an appointment and saw the heartbeat. This little peanut has stuck around the longest so far. Fingers crossed. May the pregnancy be smooth, healthy and uneventful. Last time I got teary-eyed cats in the cradle. Last time I cried. Wow, years ago. Must have been when I lost my job, got dumped and my grandfather died. All within 6 hours. That was enough to set me over the edge. Big yikes dude. I hope things eventually worked out and got better with time. I'm more emotional than your standard guy. I'll tear up fairly frequently, even at movies and the like. Usually with things involving loss of parents. Last time I would say I actually cried was when I decided it was time to go to a therapist, and in the initial meeting was just offloading all the reasons I decided to come and why I thought I might have a touch of depression. I'm doing much better now. Last time I straight out ugly cried sobbed was when they put my mother's casket into the vault at the mausoleum, almost 5 years ago now, while hugging the heck out of my brother. It was over the weekend. I was reaching out to a few different friends to see what they're up to, but everyone else had pre-existing plans. It hit me hard when I realized that I'm always making an effort to reach out, but I don't get the same in return. I do a lot of the work, and when I try to make plans, there's always something that comes up or they're too busy. This last weekend, after a night of drinks, a very good friend of mine and I were ending the night at her apartment. We had been chatting for a bit when at one point, she redirected the conversation and began to beam about how she's proud of the man I've become. She talked about my character, how I treat people, and my habits. She told me there are things I do that she admires, things that I've been doing for years, and that I thought no one noticed. It was a very tender moment and I couldn't help tearing up. I've never had a friend or loved one, other than a relative, say such beautiful things about me. Bless her soul, I don't know what I would do without her. To say that she's an amazing person wouldn't be enough. She loves you. Whether romantically or platonically, she admires, respects and loves you. Never let her go. A couple days ago in the shower, the song You Can Let Go Now Daddy came on. My grandpa had an aneurysm blow and my mom sang that song to him when they unplugged the machines. It'll always make me cry. You can let go now daddy. I had to Google this one. I made it to where the dad was giving her away at her wedding before I had to close the window. I don't feel like crying at work today. There was a sad song on the radio. Good one though. This was Yesterday. I cry all the time, for various reasons. I'm nearly 30 years old. I actually think it is healthy to do so. Whenever I've finished crying, I always feel so much better about whatever it is. Shed a few tears at the end of 1917 in the theater a couple weeks back. Not ashamed in the least. My friend and gym partner killed himself on November 5th and I didn't know for a whole week. I was texting him daily things like, hey man, where are you at? Are we lifting today? Did I do something wrong? Why aren't you replying? Hey man, if you don't respond to this message, I'm calling the police for a welfare check. And then a friend found the GoFundMe on Facebook. I cried so hard and loud that I heard my roommate approach my door to knock. He heard me through the door and did a quick about face to retreat back to his room. Today someone approached me in the gym saying, hey man, do you know what happened to Run? He was in my class and just stopped showing up one day last semester, and I went full deer in the headlights before straightforwardly answering he killed himself, then returning to my workout to avoid the emotions and awkwardness. I started drinking at 8 AM today, so I got that going for me. I'm so sorry you lost your friend. Your last sentence worries me. When my dad died, I started drinking like that and spiraled into a dark place for years. Please be kind to yourself and take care of yourself. It may mean seeing a professional who can guide you in your grief. Last year on my birthday, because I made it this far and some of my friends did not. A saying that I remind myself from time to time. Never regret growing old. It's a privilege not afforded to everyone. When my father was so grumpy he kept on shouting at my mom that she ran out of the house with her keys. I joined her a little later outside and sat with her till she went home, and then went to my GF and cried on her shoulders. Hope you are doing better, man. Walking into rehab when almost no one knew I was going. 60 days later I'm sober as heck and going to be a sober dad. I felt this one. Only some of my family knew. I just disappeared from work. Don't even recall how that part was arranged. Congratulations on 60 days. That's a big deal. This internet stranger is super proud of you. This morning, we lost a son who was born at 20 weeks a few weeks ago. He lived for 2 hours and died in my arms. Every time I close my eyes I see him. I know it'll get better in time, but for now it's rough. Last Friday, I hadn't seen a group of friends for a long time, and none of them asked how the past 3 months had been. Last month, when my daughter was born. Congrats. Just over a year and a half ago, when I was writing up a little letter for my just recent ex-GF, we both decided to go our own ways, but I was scared she would react, so I wrote a letter to let her know that it was just an honest handful of issues I couldn't get past and that I would always cherish what we had. Part of the reason I was crying was knowing full well that I care too much sometimes and am constantly taken advantage of, but there I was, selling my soul up the river to try and give her closure so she wouldn't do anything reckless. My dog was sick and I couldn't afford the vet bill to have him taken care of overnight. A couple days ago, my wife and I have been trying to get pregnant for 3 years now with no luck. We've been to the fertility doctor several times, had several tests ran on both of us, done IUI, the whole 9 yards, nothing. Doctor says there's no physical reason why we shouldn't be able to conceive. Been a long, emotional journey for both of us. A friend comes home from church work in Africa, just got married in September to a native guy in their church, came home to see family and announced her pregnancy. We're happy for them, but it still hurts like heck. Just couldn't hold it in anymore. Last night, unexpected, work night shift in the NRN. Last night of the work week. I work 7 on with 7 off, accumulating 80 hours in that 7 days on. Go to bed at 8 AM. Wife wakes me to at 4:30 PM to shower and be ready for family dinner at 5 with my 3-year and 1-year daughters. As usual, wife wakes me up with my 2 daughters. They're all really excited to see me. My wife is talking with me. The 3-year is playfully yelling at me about her toy, and the 1-year is also loudly babbling. I got overwhelmed and yelled stop pretty abruptly and abrasively. Wife realized I was a grump and quietly took the kids out, leaving me to myself to finish waking up. While I work very hard to not be in a shat, I was still disconnected and overall too exhausted to invest in my family the rest of the night before I left at 6:30 p.m. for my 12-hour shift. Fast forward to work, and the last night was very much like every other night this week. A whole lot of misery and bulls just swimming in acute psychosis, weed, crazies screaming and unsafe to themselves and to staff, sprinkled with a few really sick patients, and a ridiculously busy department. I love my job, I love what I do, and I love going to work, just not this week. Co-worker and fellow nurse who I was with asked me what's up because she could see something was on my mind. Now, I spend nearly the entire 80 hours working with her. She's a wonderful friend, and next to my wife and daughters, I spend a very considerable amount of my time and life with her at work. I told her how I was upset with myself for exploding at my wife and kids who were just so excited to see me because they haven't had much of me all week. I broke down and got teary and had to excuse myself to collect myself so I could get back to work keeping my patients safe and alive. There were other small factors that led me to be irritable, such as lack of sleep and stress and the dang neighbor dog barking constantly while sleeping, but I felt like a monster. High stress, high risk jobs eventually eat up the good parts of you and it eventually seeps into private life. Remember to manage stress and take care of yourself so you can be replenished. To those supporting people in those jobs, remember that irritability isn't directed towards you. Sometimes, we just get overwhelmed. Every so often, in my office alone when life gets to be too much, I open a bottle of whatever whiskey I have in my fridge, pour a glass, and just quietly let tears stream down my face for a few minutes. Then I wipe my face as quietly as I can and move on. Kinda like I'm doing right now. Last Friday I was fairly drunk and thought about how much I love my nieces and nephews. I cry pretty often, about every other week or so. It's not healthy for men to bottle up their emotions and not cry for months or years at a time. You sound like a cool uncle. Last year, 1 week after my birthday on a Friday morning at I believe 10:43 am, I sat in the veterinary room with my dog in my arms, as I whispered, "You're such a good girl," and then I broke down. In middle school, I cried because a group of kids were making fun of me, and then they beat the crap out of me for crying. Should have blown snot on them, that would teach them. Last night, I finally worked up the courage to open up to my dad about my anxiety and depression, and his response was, "Name one thing you have to be anxious or depressed about." So basically just invalidating all of my feelings. It freaking hurt. The last time I really let go was when my grandfather passed last year. He was a World War II veteran army and one of my primary influences for joining the army after high school. I spent about the last 15 years going to visit him at least every other weekend, sitting and talking with him, but mostly just listening to all of his stories. We both knew once his time was coming to an end, but it absolutely gutted me once he wasn't around anymore. We both knew once his time was coming to an end, but it absolutely gutted me once he wasn't around anymore.